government just aren't joining the dots on this, and I don't know if that's deliberate or whether they just haven't thought it through properly. But my mum's in a care home. She suffered a catastrophic stroke about 5 years ago, and had to go from a perfectly independent life into needing 24/7 care. She had to fund that herself until all of her money ran out. And over the course of the last 5 years, I've seen how difficult it is to get care workers into a very well-regarded private care home, let alone council-run care homes. And I think fundamentally for me, we need to start valuing care workers. We need to pay them properly, and we need to stop suggesting that they're kind of doing jobs that are at the bottom of the scale, and getting people off of unemployment is rubbish. It's a vocational job, and the people they're dealing with are vulnerable. They need proper care and support. And it's shocking.
Tracy, there is, though, a limit on what the government can do to address the salary levels for care workers, because so many of them are employed not in government-run and council-run facilities, but in private facilities.
But again, I think that comes back to, was it under the Labour government that the whole care system was privatised? So I think fundamentally
but we are
need
where
a
we
review
are, though. But we are where we are.
I think we need a review of the care system, because I personally believe we're at the stage where it needs to be a cross-party policy, that we come up with a short, medium and long-term policy as to how the care system is going to be structured and funded going forward, because it's on its knees. Individuals are losing vast amounts of money having to pay for their own care. That's a separate issue, but the whole thing is all tied up together. And if we just keep going down this route, it is never going to get any better. Nobody wants to address it. It's a vote loser.
I don't in any way mean to diminish what you're saying, but there's not a lot of cross-party action taking place in British politics these days.
No, I agree, but there should be, because the state we're in many, many areas, personally, and I'm so sick of politics. I'm sick of Kemi Badenoch coming out on the trade deals, criticising them. Well, everybody is in the same position. We should be working together, because at the end of the day, people in this country feel poor. They're distracted by all these dog whistle politics because they don't feel like their lives are getting any better. And unless or until the government start governing with the support of opposition is there to hold the government to account, not to play politics.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Tracy, but it's just that cross-party cooperation feels like it is an epoch away from where we all find ourselves politically in 2025.
I think it's a sad situation to be in, where people objectively forget that we are all human beings, right? So I was raised in Croydon. I'm mixed race. I have half white British family, and then I'm Gambian Mauritian. Okay, so I grew up in a very diverse area, and my favorite thing about it is I walk down the high street, right, and there's a Vietnamese greengrocer, a Turkish barber, an African shop, and then a Lidl, and then there's obviously a McDonald's, and then there's obviously a Greg's. But there's all of these.
I love the obviously in that.
There is.
Yes, of course there is. Of course there is.
But that to me is a wonderful thing, because it shows that we can all exist next to each other. And hearing a foreign language to me is not a threat to my identity. I know what my identity is. I know where I was raised. I know the people I was around, and that to me is a wonderful thing, that all these businesses can coexist. But I think what people are misplacing their anger towards the foreigner is actually they feel as though, you had a previous caller who said he feels as though British culture and British identity is lost, right? I grew up, the past 2 years, I lived with my grandma, who's a white British woman. And I used to talk to her about this stuff a lot. And she would say, I don't recognise the high street anymore. And I think what people are feeling, they're misplacing this feeling of I don't recognise it because, okay, for example, there's not my classic British butcher anymore. There's not my classic British greengrocer. There's not these small handmade boutiques of classically British things. What actually is there now are these soulless corporate businesses. There's a Greg's, there's a Costa, there's 3 Starbucks, there's a McDonald's, there's a Popeyes. There's not an opportunity for people to have independent businesses, which makes it feel like who is around you. There's not it's just soulless. These high streets have become so soulless. I went to Ireland and I was blown away. I went to Galway and all of the pubs were independent in a way. And in the pubs, all the people there were talking to each other. Even if you didn't speak the language, they were talking to you, but they were all singing these songs and everyone knew the words. And I felt like, wow, this is what the people in England feel they're missing, this community aspect that oftentimes the pub used to have for people. My dad, who was white, he used to tell me about his stories of the pub growing up, and everyone would come there and everyone, if you needed a job, you'd walk in and you'd talk to someone and they'd end up giving you a job and then you'd work for them for 10 years. There's this, everything's very detached now and everything's very cold and corporate and very capitalist. And I think people are blaming
That's really
on
interesting.
the wrong thing.
There's also perhaps a yearning for their own lost youth sometimes among older people, because it's certainly not confined to older people, what you describe, but people who can actually remember the high streets you're talking about.
Yeah.
When they were walking on those high streets, they were more carefree and younger and freer almost.
I think as well, like when you are, so I'm a young person that's grown up around people from other countries in my school. I went to a school where there was a lot of kids from all over the world speaking all these different languages. So that to me has never been an uncomfortable feeling. I think when you grow up around something, that's what you know. So to me, being around people, like if I'm on the train and no one's speaking English, I don't care. Do you know what I mean? I'll smile to you and it's nice. And if anything, like I like talking to people that don't speak my language, because where have you come from? What a different world have you come from? How crazy is it that we're here together? I think you can't be mad that England has become this diverse when if you position yourself as the pioneer of globalization, as the pioneer of the developing world, and you, unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but you take resources from everywhere else in the world to build that success, to build this amazing city, an amazing country that we have, with the opportunity to have takeaway every night and you can buy new clothes every day. Like this complete freedom to buy and become who you want. People are going to be drawn to that because you've taken from their country to make that.
Yes, and I mean, the reason I'm pausing is because I can't really think of how a politician addresses the feelings that you describe, except by explaining them rather than feeding them or pandering to them.
Yeah, nothing happens without context. Like, we haven't gotten to this point just one day, like all the floodgates opened and everyone came in and all of a sudden everyone's speaking Hindi on your street. That's not how it happens. There's generational things that have happened. There are generations of, like, the Windrush generation got brought over, and those people, they've been here for years, decades, right? And people now are just angry because that's not in the background. They can see it now. It was always here. England is an island. People forget that. This is an island, geographically an island, and an island cannot exist without migration. If it wasn't for the French invading, we wouldn't even be here. The Germans, the royals have German blood. Like, this has always been something that will happen here. And for as long as we are separate from Europe physically, this is always going to happen. So to act like it's like this big problem now when it is a fundamental part of the fabric of being an island, what's different is the attitude. And what's different now is, unfortunately, because it's going on for so many generations, and because those immigrants have worked hard to establish themselves and own the corner shops and own businesses and own a Turkish barbers, now people can see it, and that makes them uncomfortable because, again, because when they were younger, like you said, they probably didn't see it as much, or they didn't have to pay attention to it, or they were young, so nostalgia is a big part of it. Now they can see it, and that makes them uncomfortable because, unlike me, they didn't grow up with people speaking a different language in their classroom. So to them, it makes them nervous. They don't know how to approach it.
And nobody's helping them.
Yeah, the only way to ever understand something is to talk to someone. The person that you're sitting next to on the bus who doesn't speak your language has more in common with you than you will ever know. You all struggle for the same things. You all want to feed your families. You might have both just been fired from your job. You don't know how you're going to pay rent. And you are there being angry at them speaking a different language instead of wondering, like, where they come from. Are they okay? How is their life going? Yeah, it's so mind-blowing to me that people would be so hostile.
It is genuinely mind-blowing to you. It's not to me because I've been doing this job for 20 years, but there's something incredibly refreshing about hearing how ridiculous it looks to your, obviously, rather younger eyes. How do you turn that round?
I think people need to remember that we are living in an age of where, okay, one thing I always bring up to people, which sounds ridiculous, but never forget Cambridge Analytica existed during the Brexit time. Yeah. This was a company that manipulated people in millions and thousands in order to get the Brexit vote to happen. It was so influential that the company got shut down. They were told, you have done something very wrong here. You have used social media. You have used advertising. I don't know if anyone has not seen it. Watch the documentary on Cambridge Analytica and think about how we have got to where we're at now.
Well, it's worse now than it was then. I mean, this is one area where I do know what you're talking about, but it's considerably worse now. It's gone unchecked. And, of course, the efforts to properly find out what happened then have been stymied by the politicians that benefited from the Brexit that the manipulation of votes delivered. One thing I will tell you, at risk of sounding patronising, God forbid, perish the thought, people hate being told they've been manipulated, and that's a big part of the problem as well.
Exactly, and I myself am just as vulnerable to being manipulated one way or another. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
And I think people more and more, like my mum is the daughter of an immigrant, and she voted Brexit. Yeah. That to me is mind-blowing. But because she's on her phone being fed all this stuff, similar to how people feel, she can't get a doctor's appointment because the other person is taking it from you.
Well, Nathan in Wolverhampton, an immigrant whose wife was treated by immigrants, convinced that the reason why the NHS is suffering is because of immigrants.
Exactly. But we must remember that there are companies that are manipulating us day by day by day.
It's not just that's the modern iteration of something that's been around for forever. I mean, I quoted quite liberally from a Daily Mail article about German Jews fleeing Hitler in the 1930s, and the language of that Daily Mail article was the sort of verbal equivalent of Farage's poster that he put up, the Breaking Point poster that he put up on the day that Joe Cox was assassinated by a white supremacist. What's mad, and what I kind of needed to hear from Aysha to be reminded of what right and wrong look like. What's mad is that those people have won everything. I mean, all right, a Labour government got in, but that was really only as a consequence of how absolutely awful everything the Tories touched was, largely as a consequence of Brexit. They got their Brexit. And now the idea is, well, we just need to do it again. We just need to do it again. We just need to come down even harder. And today, Aysha, final question, because I'm late for the news. Do you think Keir Starmer today, I don't know how much of the speech you heard, but do you think he's become part of the problem that you describe rather than the solution?
I think he is up against massive bullies against immigration, right? And ultimately, our form of government that we have, if you want to stay in power, you have to say what you think people want to hear. And I think that he believes it. I think he's going to get tougher, not because necessarily ethically he thinks it's the right thing to do or even logically, but because the other parties are so tough that it's sort of like, God, if I have any chance of actually being able to make progress with what I want to do, I'm going to have to be tougher.
I'm going to have to absorb my membership of this ecosystem.
It's adapt or die, isn't it? And he's adapting to the fact that you now have Reform who, because of social media and because of their impressive ability, this cult-like persona, charisma that they have, he has to try and compete with that. And any integrity and honest conversation about the state of this country and what migration has done will not benefit him, because it's that thing of the loudest person in the room unfortunately gets the most attention and the most bold and the most controversial.
And of course the complicity of many members of my profession, because it's so good for business to whip up the kind of hatreds that you've just done a beautiful job of diffusing. And you'd think somebody somewhere might have noticed that you can be quite successful in the British media by holding the views that Aysha holds. It's just that the opportunities seem somewhat few and far between. It is. Thank you, Aysha. You've made me 5 minutes late for the news, which is a testament to the quality of your contribution.
So Keir has fooled everyone. He's fooled the country, Typically, we thought Labour, slightly lean favourably towards people that look like me, all right? But even looking at the Labour government, when you look at the Conservatives and Labour, you would thought the Conservatives were more, more favourable to ethnic minority by the sheer numbers that are representative within their ministers and MPs and whatnot. That's what I'm on about.
But why does representation by skin colour mean representation by opinion?
Well, historically, Labour has sold ethnic minorities something that really isn't really true, and also poor people as well, like they are for the poor, and then they come in, they take the winter fuel allowance.
They're taking Richard. I'm not going to have this. They've taken.
That's fine.
They've taken the winter fuel allowance away from wealthy pensioners. In the main, it's away from what there are people on the cusp, and I agree with you. That's not very nice, and they could have done it differently. But they have taken the winter fuel. No. Hang on a sec. You can't have it that Labour have damaged the poor by taking away the winter fuel allowance. The opposite is true. They have taken it away from wealthy people.
I do know where you stand on that. That's fine. Yeah. We can argue tomorrow about that. But in terms of this, right, he started off by saying, I'm not being political. When people start off by saying that, you know that they are being political, okay? There's something weird about Keir Starmer that I can't even figure out. The other day, he called Donald Trump on that phone call, Donald, about 20 times, which was cringing, okay? Yeah. He's a man of freebies. This upstanding guy whom told the whole nation to vote for him because he is so far different to the Conservatives, to find out that he is absolutely worse. The amount of freebies that him and his chancellor have taken from donors and other people, it's ridiculous.
I think, Richard,
Tom,
listen,
have you lived in any other country before, other than England?
Starmer? Or me?
No, you.
Have I lived in any other country?
Yes.
No. Okay.
Well, I have. So let me give you a little flavour. When in any country, okay, there are little communities, there are little cliques, okay? You cannot take that away from communities. That is how society is. So the idea that we're going to be strangers and whatnot, that statement alone is racist. Okay?
How's it racist?
You take it how you want.
How's it racist?
It's racist in that, okay, people are allowed to form communities how they want without a prime minister having to interfere on how they live.
People do need to integrate into the country in which they've moved.
That's different from integration. People can integrate and not necessarily want to be friends with you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm not asking you to be friends with me.
In my community, I talk to all of my neighbours, but that don't extend to beyond the pond where I don't talk to nobody. That's okay. I don't have to integrate and talk to
Richard,
the whole community.
Please, don't.
So the idea that we'll be strangers is ludicrous. Okay, and this man.
Well, Richard, you understand? Hang a sec. The context in which he's saying an island of strangers is if integration doesn't happen, and I think
you can't. No, he has to come and explain it for himself. Tom,
but that's what he said. He said, hang on a sec. Hang on a sec.
I don't buy that.
Okay. Stay there. Right, we're going to do this. Keith, first clip from 5:05, please. Starmer, Island of Strangers, 9 seconds. Richard, listen to this.
In a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers.
Without the rules that govern the way in which societies integrate, we risk becoming an island of strangers. Richard?
So we need rules to govern us so that we can all integrate.
No, so that we can integrate.
But that doesn't make sense. Integration means different things to other people. Integration, all right. What's your definition of integration?
You need to be able to speak the language.
Okay.
There you go. Starter for 10. You need to be able to speak the language.
And a lot of people... Look, because of my work, right, I have always disagreed with people that have lived in this country for 20 years, and I still have to get an interpreter for them, okay? I completely fundamentally disagree with that, okay? I feel like you need to speak English after being here for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Okay? He is not talking about that, though. He really isn't talking about that. His language, all right, you need to recognize that for people like me, it affects, okay? Because people like me who have done so well in England, all right? Tom, I go to people's houses and we often have conversations, and when they say, these people come here and take our jobs off of us, and I ask them, what job? What job do you qualify that an immigrant is taking? Mm-hmm. And I'm yet to have one answer.
The first thing I would do is with prisoners is hard labour. I'm sorry if it's not politically correct, but when you go in prison, you can't play pool all day. You've got to work, and why not get these especially the younger ones, to build the new prisons that they're going to probably end up living in the rest of their life?
What, they got to build their own prisons?
Yeah, don't you think it's a great idea? And then that way,
No,
and then
Colin,
I think it's and then you can do plumbing, bricklaying, and then if you can't be bothered to, if you still rather earn a week's work in an hour selling drugs, it's up to you. But one other thing, if I can say it quickly, why not charge people when they're in prison? If an old person goes in home and they've got a house, they've got to sell it to pay for it. Why not make these prisoners pay 20, 30 grand a year to be in prison?
Because they haven't got the money. Most of them won't have the money.
Yeah, but these other criminals, these drug dealers, they'll have big houses, big cars and all that. Get them to sell these cars and charge them 20, 30 grand a year.
What proportion of prisoners do you think would be able to afford to pay 30 grand a year to be in prison?
I don't know. But you're saying about the drugs, but are these people in prison actually just selling marijuana? Whenever I've seen these things on telly, they don't go inside. The only ones who go inside are people selling Class A drugs like cocaine. So we're going to legalise that next. I'm not.
Even if we don't legalise it, I agree with you. People who sell Class A drugs, it's not a victimless crime by any means. They should be punished. Do they need to be locked away for months and years on end? Is there not something else we can do to penalise?
There's no alternative to prison, is there?
Yeah,
You've just got to make it. There isn't.
We've
I'm
been
sorry,
talking about them.
But what though? What? I've heard one thing that's saying.
Take the text that said make them clean sewers for 2 years.
Yeah, but
tags. All the rest of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't agree with it. Sorry, but I'm quite for buildable prisons. I don't mind paying an extra £100 or £200 a year.
Really?
But teach them plumbing. They're all plumbers are on criminal wages anyway, aren't they? So you might as well.
That's a bit unfair on the plumbers, Colin.
But they're all getting £100 a year, aren't they?
All the things that our taxes could be spent on right now, given the state of this country, you're happy for it to £5 billion more to be spent on new prisons?
Yes,
really?
I am. I really don't mind.
I'm not. You can pay for it, Colin. I'm not paying for it.
I mean, you're probably going to cut me off. I think I've got a bit of time anyway. But
go on,
I mean, if you got rid of some of these murderers and just got rid of them permanently, you'd have
you talk about death penalty. We talked about this last night, and I was vehemently against the death penalty. Colin, thank you for your call. The problem with allowing prisoners to build the next generation of prisons that house them is they're going to build loads of little escape tunnels, aren't they? They're going to know where all the exits are. I don't know if that one's thought through.
I've always defended him for his right to a political opinion. I was 8 years old as well when he took over at Matter Today, so he's all I've really known.
Okay.
At the Matter Today, I'm a bit too young to remember Des Lynam, but I don't know how he can claim ignorance in this one. He's got 30 years on me. He's been in the media for decades. He spent 3 years playing at Tottenham Hotspur. That's a club with deep Jewish roots.
That's a good... But, no one said that to me before. You're right. That's a huge Jewish following, isn't it, Spurs?
Yeah, so I can't fathom. He's got a great head on his shoulders. He seems like a great guy. I don't necessarily think he's anti-Semitic, but he has posted something that there's no way he didn't know about the rat trope.
So why is he doing it? Because he is a bright bloke. Why is he doing this?
I don't really have a straightforward answer. I mean, one of the things I have noticed, though, is that more and more you see it from both the great and the good down to your man in the street all the way up to people like Elon Musk, Gary Lineker, is they start off with a political opinion on the left or the right, but then very quickly they get pushed further and further into the company of, bad conversations and these, they start posting things that are a bit anti-Semitic or a bit racist. They may not be anti-Semitic or racist themselves, but it very quickly normalises for them that they can post these things.